Hey, Josh, can you hear me? You're muted. You're muted.
Hi,
Hi, hey,
sorry.
I know we're recording, so I'll be
I'm
up.
tr- I'm trying to stop the recording for, oh, there it is. Hi. The Please ask the host to give you permission to record. I don't know why that's the issue. Somehow I'm not a host. I'm gonna jump out and jump back in. So give me a second.
Okay. It's probably the other Andrew Schulman who is the host, right? I mean, that's was started
Yeah.
by Eva or whoever.
All right. I'm gonna jump back out. I'll be back in.
Who is Andrew Schulman?
It's who knows? It's some weird thing that the way they set this whole thing up.
To talk about our learning. Okay, so good morning. It's wonderful to see everybody and for us to celebrate together. And today we're going to be focusing on another stage of rituals, which is quite significant because while we'll spend a good portion of the time talking about the quintessential educational moment in the bar or bat mitzvah, and we'll talk about it in the 21st century language next week. We'll also be talking about all the different moments in life when learning occurs and how that has become ritualized. And the fact that learning takes on a ritual quality is something that I do really think is a unique Jewish approach. Every human being has learning moments, right? And rites of passage or learning moments are made holy, if you will, or they're made special by different traditions in different ways. But in the Jewish tradition, because there is such a premium on learning, not only is it a daily practice, the ritual of learning is a daily practice, but every significant piece of learning which punctuates one's life is also one worthy of ritual. So just to kind of like take a big step back, let's ask the question, why? Why is that such an important thing in Jewish identity? What is worthy of ritualizing learning? Why does that become the quintessential kind of ritual moment in the sort of active life of a Jewish person? Any ideas? Like what's to mind when you think about that? Why would we bother making learning a ritual? Why would we make learning a sacred act?
I have a suggestion. I don't know if it's the answer, but um, I think that for me, making learning a ritual is because to be Jewish is to live our teachings. I mean,
Okay. And so the ritual is an opportunity by extension, you're saying the ritual is then it's an extension of the living that takes place.
right.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Anybody else? Me.
I think about just routines in daily life as being a lot of things we do kind of automatically. But learning actually you have, it's an act that it requires that you be present and that you be active. It's something that you can't just do automatically. There actually is a commitment that takes place every time you open it. And I think that that's part of the reason, is that it connects us so much with spirituality if we are actively involved in the process.
That's beautiful, right? Like it's an intentional act. And because it's intentional, that means that that you can, and actually you have it so well, you cannot be a learner without actually being engaged in it, right? Because otherwise it goes, as they say, in one ear, out the other. Sukasa.
The other thing is, I think that it's a community experience. A lot of Jewish learning is learning with a partner, or you need a minion to have to read Torah. So I think it really emphasizes the sense of community.
Fantastic. I do agree. Judy.
Well, looking at the screen, other than you and the non-Andrew Schulman on the screen, we're all female.
No,
And-
but Adam Siegel's there.
Well, that's what I said.
Oh.
The other Andrew Schulman. Is that when you think of Talmudic studies, everyday studies, I just can't help but thinking, even though it is our Jewish tradition, it was a male tradition. The women, I think of Yentl, the women were not allowed to study, and how much things have evolved to the point where we are today, thankfully. But interesting that Jewish tradition going back was a male God-given right versus egalitarian, which has evolved obviously through the centuries. So I'd like your comment on that.
I think, first of all, that's a wonderful comment, and it's a really important comment. So without spending the next hour talking about the historical and sociological forces that brought us to this moment, let us just simply say that by sanctifying learning and making learning at the forefront, that was what precipitated the ultimate awareness that this needed to be an egalitarian experience. So yes, it took a long period of time, and there's certainly lots of things to express frustration and dismay and even, like, anger at how much was wasted and lost for the millennia, thousands of years in which the voices of women learners were silenced, which isn't entirely true. There's plenty of women that were contributing, but it wasn't placed in the forefront because of the sociology of the moment. But it takes so this is sort of a forward-thinking response. What is it going to look like if we continue on a daily basis to sanctify our learning? It's kind of what Jeannie said, which is that by doing this, we are going to continually evolve. We're doing it with a commitment, and we have a certain intentionality behind it. And when we have that intentionality, what we're yet to learn and discover is possible. It's a very hopeful thing to say that our learning is worthy of a ritual. Audrey?
Yeah, I was thinking that the prayer that you were talking about at the beginning, when as part of the whole ritual that you thank God for different things, and I believe I learned, I can't remember if it was in your class or if I'd known it before, that one of the things is that because it's a male prayer, they thank God for not making them a woman. Is part of the traditional litany of that prayer, which has always disturbed me.
Yeah, and one another really, that's a great comment, is that, so there's one that sort of like was codified at a particular point in time with a particular intention, right? And it was accepted at that time, but it became so intolerable at a certain point in time that in most non-Orthodox, in all non-Orthodox synagogues, and in their Sidurim, in their books, they've removed that text and said, instead of saying, which is, thank God for not making me a woman, or actually, the women who recite this in daily prayer, they added it saying, thank you for making me according to your will, right? Which is lovely, right? is that they transform that prayer altogether to mean something that is, you know, beyond gender. That happens because you make the learning important, right? Because I was thinking about this just as a digression moment, right? But there is something when you think about sort of Jewish identity in the world and what is the uniqueness of Jewish identity, it's the very capacity to ask why. Why is this the way that it is? Which is really the foundation of scientific inquiry, which is really the foundation of you know, in philosophical terms, enlightenment inquiry. It's having the curiosity about understanding ourselves, right? That has really prompted us to discover new things, and that's why you'll find the greatest thinkers in sciences and you know, political science and social sciences and artistry because of that sort of why quality. Franny, did you have your hand, or did anybody else have their hand up, or we're okay? All right. Somebody else? Oh, that's me. That's so interesting.
You changed my name. Thank you. I'm on my iPad and I still can't figure out how to do it.
I'm gonna get to everybody one by one as soon as you talk. Okay. All right. So let's jump into the learning. Right. So now, so that's one piece of ritual, and just knowing that it's there, you know, everything that we shared about why it's important is a really great foundation to kind of also delve today. What we're going to talk about is the what, right? The what has constituted the rituals over time. And next week we're going to go further because we continually ask why, because we are intentional about our learning, because we make a commitment to learning more, we have identified that in the 21st century, how we ritualize learning has also evolved in a very important way. So hold on that. I'm excited by it, but we need this week first. Okay. So let's hope that this is the right one. Can you see that? Everybody can see it? Is that good? All right, fantastic. I'm gonna make it bigger. And Audrey, you're on my screen. Would you like to read? I think it's because you were the last pin, which is good. Go
Sure,
for
no
it.
problem. Okay, stages of life and learning. Yehuda ben Tema used to say, at 5 years of age, the study of scripture, at 10, the study of Mishnah, at 13, subject to the commandments, at 15, the study of Talmud, at 18, the bridal canopy, at 20, for pursuit of livelihood, at 30, the peak of strength, at 40, wisdom, at 50, be able to give counsel, at 60, old age. It's depressing. At 70, but I know I'm old. At 70, fullness of years. At 80, the age of strength. At 90, a bent body. At 100, as good as dead, gone completely out of the world.
Okay, so you know, this is sort of interesting text, right? And it definitely has some resonance with us because we fit into one of these life stage categories. And I think we're kind of, you know, maybe feeling perhaps that our experience of life is a little premature to the life stage that we have been designated according to this text. The only thing that gives us consolation is that if somebody did live to be 100 years old in 2000 years ago, ancient Israel, that would actually be really like somebody who's living into their 120s, maybe even 130s. Okay, so, you know, all of that kind of like practical understanding leads us to something more conceptual. So what do we see as something more conceptual here? That's so interesting. So by the way, I got Tracy. So I just see your messages. So yes, you can either hover over and do rename, or the three dots can do rename. And Yehuda Ben Tema, I will explain for just a moment. And then Tracy, you said you changed your name, but that it changed you back. I guess it's got it out for you. So I'll try to change.
Didn't change it back on the screen. And I didn't ask about Yehuda. That's somebody else. Sorry. Mine is, but yeah, it looks like Tracy, but when I go into the chat, it's so familiar.
All right, good. All right. So anyways, so your name shows up on my screen, so we're good. Okay. So Yehuda Ben Tema is, and I'm going to take this off the screen so that we can look at each other for a moment. Yehuda Ben Tema was one of the rabbis that was part of the he was part of the Mishnaic tradition. He was part of that time period in which he was contributing little bits of wisdom. So he has a couple of like quips and quotes that make it into the book of Pirkei Avot. We don't know a whole lot about him from other stories of the Talmud, for example. So it's not like he has a rich narrative history or a rich story that is told and recorded in the text, but he gets named for this text. So it's not like he was a major rabbi. I would consider him a minor rabbi for that. Okay. And I'll tell you what, since we haven't changed everybody's name yet, if you can't change your name, just identify yourself as who you are in the chat. So, you know, we'll sort of keep ourselves to be as accountable as possible. So, so the reason that I brought this text was actually because I wanted to focus on the bar mitzvah. Because bar mitzvah, which is in America, is a very, very important rite of passage. And there are a lot of reasons that that came to be. There are a lot of reasons that that came to be. Oh, somebody's got themselves unmuted, and I'm going to just mute you. Okay. And I'll just say, you know, in America, one of the short answers is that it was sociological, because the sociology of the American Jewish community was such that at the beginning of the 20th century, you had a lot of immigrant Jews who used to be very active in Jewish life, but because they were out and working in America and making a living, they became increasingly disconnected from their Jewish home and community. And so what one rabbi who was very specific in New York did is he said, you actually have to become a member of a synagogue in order to give your kid a bar mitzvah. And then he began to sort of develop the concept of what a bar mitzvah was. Now, we may know this as well because there was a great teacher, a very important rabbi of the 20th century named Mordechai Kaplan, whose name you might be familiar with. And Mordechai Kaplan, among many of his contributions to overall Jewish identity and Jewish writings, but in particular American Jewish identity, he was the first one to create and institute what is known as the bat mitzvah. And his daughter, Judith Kaplan, was the first bat mitzvah, I believe, in 1921. I think that was the year. I'll stand corrected if that's the case. Meaning that, you know, it's been about 100 years that women have been considered bat mitzvah with ceremonies. And knowing historically, it still took quite a bit of time, because for those of you women that had been benot mitzvah, that's the plural, in the sort of mid to late 20th century, that could have been as simple as coming up to the synagogue on a Friday night, not a Saturday morning, not before the Torah, and receiving a blessing, to chanting from the Haftarah, which I've heard from a lot of women that were raised in South Africa and in Orthodox communities. They learn text, but because the Haftarah, which is prophetic text, doesn't have as many legal restrictions or boundaries to it, women could chant the Haftarah to simply just having a party and being called a bat mitzvah. Okay, like that. Those were all the things that were an experience. So suffice it to say that bar mitzvah is very, very light in the text tradition. There are so many things that we've already studied, like about Brit Milah, and that we studied about some of these other sort of rituals that have emerged, life cycles for weddings, life cycles for funerals, all the things that we're going to study in this class. They have a rich textual tradition. This is the only classical text about bar mitzvah, the only one. And look at what it says. At 5, you should be studying this, and we'll go back into the text so you can see it, right? It says, right, at 5, you study Torah, at 10, you study Mishnah, and at 13, you become a bar mitzvah. That's what it says. So, so speaking of this, let's move on and find out what is, here is another thing that is an implication, maybe, of what bar mitzvah is all about. So, Tracy, would you like to read? You're off screen. I don't know if that meant that you excuse yourself, so I don't want to call you out. Let's see. Let's see who else is there with my show screen. Oh, Fran, would you like to read?
There we go. Rites
Yeah,
of
we can hear you.
passage. And the youths grew up. Rabbi Levi made an analogy to a myrtle and wild rose bush, which grew next to each other. When they had grown, one gave forth scent and the other thorns. So too with these, for 13 years they both went to school and came back from school. But after 13 years, this one went to study houses, and this one went to idolatrous temples. Rabbi Elazar said, until 13 years, a person needs to take care of their children. From this age onwards, they need to say, blessed is the one who has exempted me from the punishment of this one.
Sorry, I gotta laugh at these things. Don't take it seriously. But like, all right, so this is a midrash. This comes after the Pirkei Avot that we read. So it's a little bit later and a little bit more developed. But what you read in this text is you hear it as a comparative thing. There are kids that go to school and they become good little Jewish boys, and then there are kids that go to school and they become rascals, right? And that's an ongoing motif in the distinction between here it's between Isaac and Esau. So you have this one and that one. It's about Isaac. I'm sorry, it's about Jacob and Esau. Jacob, because they were twins, right? So Jacob goes to Jacob goes to school, and that Esau goes and sort of worships idols, which is like a terrible thing to say, but it's part of the rabbinic kind of imagination that that the reason why our brothers, our cousins are not Jewish is because they sort of, we walked down the same path and then they diverged, right? So even though we identify the Muslim tradition as being descendants of Ishmael, Esau is also a descendant of one that is kind of, they become in several generations, they become the Romans. It becomes also in the story of Purim, it becomes the Persians. Ahasuerus is a descendant, and even many generations later, in some traditional circles, they will identify that descendants of Esau are also Nazis. You will hear that in Midrash. So
Wow.
basically, so now just take a look at one more text. I'm going to take it off the screen, and let's just try to put this together. So this is about the rite of passage and our best understanding of what a bar mitzvah is about. So based on these two texts, what would you say a bar mitzvah is supposed to be about? I can put the text back up just in case you want to see it, but nobody should feel like, if they don't get it right, that I'm going to take them off the screen or something. You want me to put it back up to take another look? Sherry, give it a shot.
Well, just that you're at the age where you need to start following the commandments.
Okay. So what does that mean?
Well, you've studied these since you were 5. And now you have to take responsibility for yourself. And
so one of the things is, you're right, exactly it, right? So one of the things is that this is about self-responsibility. And if you think about it, for those who've raised teenage children, it doesn't exactly happen at 13, although some of us wish that it did, right? But like I remember talking to my kids about personal responsibility. Like that was the sort of thing that we were trying to develop in our children all along, right? From the first moments that they were, just learning how to walk, we were teaching them independence and autonomy, because that's something that we felt responsible to do for our children. Now, what's beautiful about that last text, and maybe we read it too quickly, but just to recall it for you, is that at the end it says, Baruch shepatarani me'onsho shel zeh. Blessed is the one who has released me from the obligation of this one. So as much as it's about the child taking responsibility, it's also about the parent in the rite of passage relinquishing their responsibility. Okay, I am blessed. What is a bar mitzvah? A bar mitzvah is as much about the child assuming responsibility as it is about the parent releasing themselves from the responsibility, which I think is a really fascinated and not often spoken about part of what happens here. Right. So I'll just tell you today, like I'm just feeling like, as much personal, experience of this is that in my life. So I have a child who is in college, and like good parents, we want to talk to our kids. And my poor son, who's now on recording and is now hearing this, if he ever watches this video and it ever gets recorded, we reached out to him on Monday earlier in the week, and only after we like urged him to text us back and say, hey, check in with us, did he check with us back in. And part of it was like, a little frustration that he wasn't communicating with us. And another part of it was, this is when our child is becoming independent. They assume the responsibility of communicating with us. And the beauty of the moment, so I was joyful that my son is like entering into an age of independence, but I was also like, wait a minute, I want to be in communication with him. And think about it for yourselves for a moment, parents. Okay, take care, Adam. It's nice to see you, right? You know that like sometimes we want to talk to our kids all the time, right? And they're 45 years old. And you're like, don't, you're an adult, right? At some point, our children or the people that we really care about, that we assume responsibility for, we don't need to talk to them every day, because they need to sort of expand into their own identities. They need to experience life on their own. And it's the job of good parents to be able to do that. So take a look at that first text, and you just remember, what's the job leading up to the bar mitzvah? 5, you study the Torah. 10, you study the Mishnah. And so meaning that like the first 13 years of your life, you are being pickled, marinated in Jewish texts and Jewish ideas and Jewish wisdom, and we're filling you with knowledge so that you can, at one point in your life, assume responsibility for your learning moving forward. And it's interesting because in the next stage is the Talmud, which we're going to get to in a moment. And we're going to talk about studying Talmud. But then after that, it's all about livelihood, and it's all about a career, and it's about family life, and it's about wisdom, and it's about all these things that you can't get from any book. Do you notice that? There's no book for the rest of the life, according to the Pirkei Avot. So the learning and the ritualization of those moments they have a different framework. Any comments before we sort of move on to the next piece? Tracy.
I'm sorry that I'm in and out on this call. I mean, I'm gonna have to listen to the whole thing through, but I just want to say to you, as a parent, it's not going to get better with begging your kid to call you. Mine just graduated college, is starting graduate school, and graduate school is worse than college was. So, but I'm also just wondering about, this is kind of tangential, but this idea of parenting and this idea of learning, and is there not something also that we are supposed to learn from their learning? Does that make sense?
Sure, absolutely. But it's a great question, right? It's so, I mean, it's sort of, what I was trying to bring up is that as much as the bar mitzvah is about the child, it's about the parent, right? And all rituals, when you think about that, are relational. Okay, so the question is the direction. So in a moment, when we talk about the relation of ritualizing the conclusion of a piece of literature, the relationship is, as you'll see, is not only to the text that we learned, but it's also to this sort of like, concept that we identify as God. Here, it's about that tension between, human beings, right? As ones that are connected biologically or culturally, right? And like, how is there a space that is created between them that can become holy space, right? Ideally holy space, not easy. But imagine if you're connected like this and you are commanded to separate a little bit, right? Then the work is all about what gets put in between. That's what the ritual is all about. Now, imagine how it gets into practical application. It doesn't ever reach that level. But when I personally, when I was a clergy, congregational rabbi, I definitely spent time with families because I wanted them to understand that the stuff of the ritual was only one level, but the deeper stuff that was going on is something that was worthy of a rite of passage, worthy of us making all of the hoopla about it. My last comment, and then I'll turn to Sukasa and then Judy, is that, even though sociologically the bar and bat mitzvah ceremony became very popular in the United States and is now growing in popularity in Israel, it actually has a value that's worth continuing on. But it's, you know, it may not be as popular in a synagogue framework as it used to be, but it's still important. But we'll save that for next week. Okay, Sue.
Thank you. That was a great answer. I just want to say that. That was
Thank you. That's nice.
I
Thank
think
you.
I disagree with the stages of learning because it seems to say that you stop learning once you start making a living. And that isn't part of the Jewish tradition. You're supposed to always be learning, and you're supposed to always study Talmud and get deeper in the meaning and so forth. So I'd have to disagree with this.
I think that's such a great comment, especially because we've been talking about the fact that every single day you should be learning and making it holy. And this text doesn't actually continue on that way. It seems to, so it's almost as if the Pirkei Avot was really good at laying a framework of life. It is a stages of life and not necessarily stages of learning per se, but what should be written there, the next Pirkei Avot that we write should be, what are the different stages that we're writing? Can we just wait for next week? Because I think that is such a great subject of what should we be sanctifying in the learning journeys that we're taking in our lives. All right, Judy?
So I've read this passage now 3 times, and I'm thinking that every teenager has probably read this and taken it to heart, saying, as a parent, you have nothing more to teach me, so I don't need to listen to you. Because at age 13, teens become very rebellious of any parental advice. Years later, they come back around into the fold and say, what's your opinion? But that takes a long time. But the other side of the coin of this is that as a parent, it seems like this passage says, we have nothing more to give. If you go back to the first paragraph, it says, at 13, you're subject to the commandments. So if I go on to a Beit, as a young man, if I go on to a Beit HaMidrash, I'm fulfilling the commandment, and there's nothing more I have to learn from my parents. Obviously, in today's society, when I think of my 13-year-old granddaughter, if I was to say she no longer needs parental advice, or my own children, I would say I totally disagree with this passage. But if this is coming from a different time period, then I think it's all looking at the perspective of when this was written, as opposed to today. You know, this 21st century ritual, comparing it to older rituals, which is the premise of this class, and bringing it to today, I find this kind of contradictory. It just may be my opinion, but I just see that Rabbi Levy is saying that let the Beit HaMidrash take over from here. And as a parent, you've done your job. You've brought them up to the age of 13. And, you know, the age-old bar mitzvah expression of today you are a man is like saying, okay, I did my job for the first 13 years of raising you, hopefully into a good moral human being. Whereas this other child is going to an idolatrous temple, hasn't learned the lessons of life of the first 13 years that parents had taught. So I think in today's norm, 13 is still very, very young for children. And they're thrown into high school and with older kids. And I think with everything that goes on with youth today, they really need a strong parental influence.
And just adding even more, so first of all, you're right on. I'm not sure I would use the word contradictory, but I think it's puzzling to think that we would sort of record to say that there's a certain amount of, well, let's just leave it this way, right? I don't think it's contradictory. I think that there's a difference between what we identify as formal education and formative education. Okay, that they're actually different modalities. Sometimes you say formal, informal as opposites. I don't think it's formal and formative. And the case that we can bring from this text is that at a certain age, you reach the age of wisdom. Well, what does wisdom mean? Like, is that something that you just like sit on the top of a mountain and like, you know that you have it, right? Wisdom wisdom is only in relation. Wisdom is only in connection. And you, Judy, pointed it out. You're like, I'm living all this life so that I have all this wisdom to share. Now try to share your wisdom with a 13-year-old kid. How's that work out? Not so great, right? It doesn't work out so great at all. But it's like the Mark Twain comment, right? It says when I was 16-year-old, my father didn't know anything. By the time that I hit 25, he sure learned a whole lot, right? Like there's something about the formative education that has to take experience for us to be able to understand, to comprehend. Now, what a beautiful thing for us as learners. Okay, I just want this is the segue into the next text. Okay, how beautiful it is for us to be continual learners and to remember that there is something powerful between the formal and the formative that is worthy of some kind of ritual. Any other comments? Because those are all really good comments. Yes, we're okay. Awesome. Hey, Alice, how are you? You're usually very just like absorbing today. I hope everything is good. Thumbs up, love. Jeannie?
Can I just add, I was thinking a lot about this whole idea of trying to give it, educate and give advice to teenagers in general. I am embarrassed to say that I can very clearly remember from an early age, as I said, I'm embarrassed to say this, that I really didn't think my parents had anything to teach me. I mean, that sounds horrible. I was very respectful of them, but I just didn't think, I thought I was so damn smart. I'm sorry. But I think that where they did best in terms of teaching me was informal. So I would even add a third form of education, and that was showing me things, exposing me to marches for human rights and for desegregation and share and making sure there were books in the house that I was not forced to read them, but they were there. It was really and sharing their own thoughts and beliefs, not saying you should do, whenever they started in you should do, they lost me. And so I would say there's really three forms. And I think that informal one actually was the most effective.
Yeah, well, that's an excellent contribution, and I agree. I think that there's, I'm not sure what we'll title it yet, just to sort of play with the words, but the concept of modeling as well, right? That like we model behavior all the time, and it's really such an important piece. Judy, this is another piece to sort of like extend to your last comment, which is that I met a young couple last night, and I was talking to them about, when I meet with young couples and prepare them for weddings, I ask them to think about the quality of the relationships that they admire. And often they refer to parents. And when they talk about their parents' relationships, there's so much unwritten, unspoken, undirected modeling about relationships that your children will pick up on you. But even if you're, if you are if you're not a parent, right, and you're in relationship with people where there's other children, they will model themselves off of the quality of the relationships that you have with other people, right? And so I think that's a really beautiful contribution, and I think thank you for adding it. It was important. All right, so let's go in. So now the last thing that we're going to talk about for today is what's called a siyum. Siyum comes from the word lisayem in Hebrew, which means to conclude. And at every time that you conclude a piece of learning, so here it's in the context of concluding a tractate of the Talmud. So I wanted to show you, just so you saw this, okay? It's called, this is the translation is called this is the Art Scroll Talmud, Hadron. Hadron is an Aramaic word which means return to you. So like Lozer in Hebrew, for those of you that are modern speakers, is the same word. And the idea is that you finish the text and you say, I'm going to come back to you and learn from you again. Okay. And I just want to show you before I put it on the screen what it looks like in the book. This is with Hebrew and translation. And what you do is when you finish the book, this is at the end of every book. See it? It's at the end of every book. And at the end of every book, you go to these you go to these pages and you read this final prayer. Okay, now let me put it up on the screen so we can see what we're looking at. All right. Anybody haven't read that wants to read? I don't want to exclude anybody. Candy, have you read from us yet? Would you like to read?
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to? All right.
So, so you don't have to, fill in the blanks. We
Got
know
it.
that. Yeah.
Got it. We will return to you, and you will return to us. Our mind is on you, and your mind is on us. We will not forget you, and you will not forget us, not in this world and not in the next world. May it be your will, our God and God of our fathers, that we should be loyal to your Torah in this world, and it should be with us in the next world. Hanina bar Papa, Ram bar Papa. What do I have?
Those guys. Don't worry
All
about it.
those
Those
guys.
guys. Yeah, all those guys. One more paragraph.
Okay. Make it sweet, God, our God, the words of your Torah. Can you answer the phone, Norman? In our words and in the mouths of your nation, the house of Israel. And it should be that we, all of us, our children and the children of your nation, the house of Israel, that we should all know your name and learn your Torah. Your commandment makes me wiser than my enemies, for it is ever with me. Let my heart be complete in your statute, in order that I may not be put to shame. I will never forget your precepts, for with them you have quickened me.
Okay, so
Blessed
stop
are
right
you-
there.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Bless
Okay.
you
Blessed are you, O God, teach me your statute.
and forever. Okay,
Forever.
great. All right, so just to scroll back to the top. So this is recited at every time that you make a conclusion to one of the sections of the Talmudic text. And if you remember what I had said in the previous comments, is that we've now sort of like concluded learning, and it's a nexus between the formality of the learning and the formation of the thinking and the ideas that emerge from it, the transformation into action that's so important to us, right? So so if that's our goal, this is the prayer that is supposed to help us do that, right? So I love you should just sort of like admire. I love it, right? We will return to you, and you, the text, will return to us. Our mind is on you, and your mind. Wait a minute. Your mind? What is the mind of the text is on us? We will not forget you, O text, and you will not forget us. Wait a minute. How does the text have a memory? Not in this world and not in the next world. And then it has this, loyal to us and in the next world, and then it lists all these rabbis' names and it talks about the sweetness of the learning. So let me just stop there for a moment and sort of try to capture what it is that we are sort of learning here. So from your first take, what is the purpose of making a prayer like this? Anything more than I've just said? I sort of gave you the sort of foundation of it, but like, why would we ritualize the conclusion of a text? How is it possible? Maybe this is a better question. How is it possible for a text to have a mind and a memory and a will, right? We will return to you and you will return to us. How is it possible for a text to have that? Is it
I don't think it's possible for the text to have it, but it sort of reminds me of, after you have lunch with a friend, you say goodbye, I'll see you next time.
Okay, great. And you know what? It's like, yeah, right. Or even like seeing somebody and saying like, we should get together, right? Like if there's something in the feeling, right? There's a feeling, but who experiences the feeling? We feel the experience. Okay, great. Right, very good. That's a very rational way of understanding it. And I think it's got its place. Candy, what do you want to say? Yeah, I'm you.
There's like a living memory. It's the book has a living memory because you are remembering what you're learning. It's on your mind, but the fact that you will remember it is remembered. And so I think there's a mutual quality to it.
Okay. Nice, right? So like the scale is definitely weighed on our behavior, and there's this sense of, the Germans call it Gestalt, right? You've heard Gestalt, right? Gestalt is basically like, you can look at a circle, and I mean, this is sort of the rough understanding of it. You look at a circle, and if the circle, look at my hands, right? It's broken. But in general, you see that I've got a circle here, right? Right? You see that, like, because I'm shaping it, right? So Gestalt is sort of the whole thing, even though all of the little parts are missing. So there's something here in the learning that is kind of like a Gestalt experience, right? Or they have another term which is also kind of connected to it. It's a little bit similar, a little different, which is called zeitgeist, right? That there's something that's happening in the water, we call it, right? Over there's something happening, and over there's something happening, and over there's something happening. And like, these are all disconnected, but somehow, because they're all kind of happening in different places, they comprise some sort of whole thing. So there is something maybe in the experience of learning that is like a gestalt or a zeitgeist kind of experience, where there's disparate parts coming to make some sort of whole. We are doing our part by saying at the end of our learning, we are present for making the whole thing. Like, that's the ritual. What's the ritual saying? This learning that I just acquired isn't just simply, meant to be put back on the bookshelf. Okay? It's a learning that we acquired, and I own it, and I hold it, and it's mine, and I, think about it, and I'm caring for it, and I'm going to return to you, and you're going to return to me, because when I open you up and I read you, you're talking to me. Yes, the text talks to you. Of course, the text is teaching you something. Right now, maybe it was the voice of somebody a long time ago that wrote it down on the words, but that means that they're talking to you, even though they've been dead in the ground for thousands of years even. Well, that's kind of amazing. Right? Somebody that once upon a time lived a long time ago is still teaching us in our time. Well, I think that's the kind of a definition of immortality, if I've ever heard one. Right? All right, Judy, please.
So it sounds to me like it's humanizing learning, so that it's interactive, so that I will read and study you, and that learning process is calling me back and saying, the more you read, the more you learn, the more I will give you. And so it's an exchange. It's not just one-sided, where there's print on a page and I can read the words, but if I don't internalize them, then this seems to be a more humanistic approach. There's a book I read where music does the same thing. Music is the entity, and it talks about music was born in you, and everything is narrated by music as the I. And I see the same thing with the learning, that just like music can define us, learning can define us, and it's an interactive relationship that the more you read, the more I will give you.
Beautiful, right? Not only the more that I will give you, but the more you could even say it. I just love what you said. The more human you become, the more of a soul you become. That's kind of amazing, right? So like, your learning is not so that you kind of like, you surpass your humanity, but it's actually the prerequisite of becoming the most human that you could possibly be. Like you said, it's a humanistic approach. I love that. Thank you. That was a wonderful. I hope I sort of like added to what you just said in the way that you intended it, because that was really nice. What you said was really nice. All right, let's just read a little bit more so that we can see it. I'll tell you what, since we're running out of time, you notice like this is the translation of it. It's all this beautiful stuff. Amen, amen, amen. Da 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 da. It's a really great thing. And it's all these beautiful words that sort of like build upon that. Okay. So then at the end of also study, okay, whenever we learn a piece of text, we recite the Kaddish prayer. Let me just preempt this for a second for last one quick minute. Okay. This is sort of, we're going to talk about this again in a period of mourning. Okay. When we have a period of mourning, it's accustomed to teach a little bit of text. That's why rabbis come to Shiva Minyanim, but they don't have to be there, right? But sometimes rabbis come because they teach. And after they teach, that's what pre-qualifies us to recite the Kaddish prayer. That's originally what the Kaddish prayer was about. It wasn't a memorial for dead people. It was a memorial for the learning. It was a recognition for the learning. So when we make someone's life a text, then it sort of enables us to recite Kaddish. The text that I put up, but I'm going to just hold it for, I'm going to bring it in another point just because we're running out of time, is that the text of the Kaddish de Rabbanan, which is a prayer that is recited, it's called the rabbi's Kaddish prayer. It is a prayer recited specifically at the conclusion of learning. And I'll come back to the nature of the text. It just sort of adds some extra language from what you're familiar with, since you've heard the prayer before, that the extra language is all about teachers. And the idea, which is a great place for us to end. Okay, so if we talk about formative moments, if we talk about, the rites of passage from one identity to a new identity, and then we talk about the completion of life, right? The completion of life is not the end. Not in the Jewish tradition, right? We don't have heaven and hell concepts per se, but we do have some kind of like olam haba, continuation of the world even after a physical body expires. And the way that it is continued is through learning, which makes this a very important ritual to be done every single day. And it's why you guys are in this class, and it's why we, keep on learning. So, hi, Tracy. And that's what brings us to our conclusion today, but not forever, because we have to come back on Tuesday morning at 11 o'clock or 2 o'clock, wherever you are in the world. Any last comments before we conclude? Jamie.
So at our Torah study on Shabbat morning, we always end with Debbie Friedman's Kaddish de Rabbanan in English. So I just put that out there. If you'd like to join me, I could bring us to a close with that.
Sure, that's great. And I would say let's bring the text and we'll sort of begin to bring that into our learning. So let's go for it. Do you want to share it with us now?
Sure.
Great.
I mean, I can actually share the text if you want, or I can just sing it.
Whatever. Why don't you sing it this week and then we'll share the text for next week. Send it to me, okay?
For our teachers and their students and the students of their students, we ask for peace and loving kindness here and everywhere. May they be blessed with all they need, and let us say amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say amen. We ask for peace and loving kindness, and let us say amen.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Wow, I love it. Send us a text and let's do it next time, okay? All right, everybody, have a great week. And an early Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you next Tuesday. B'atzlacha rabbah, Jamie. Take care.